So this is the start of the section where we look at the weather, the systems that affect the British Isles on a day-to-day basis and bring us the particular weather we get at any particular time. Before we start with those, though, we need to cover something called air masses. So let's start off with a definition of those, please. So you can write this in at the top here for yourselves. Get my pen set up. An air mass is a large body of air. A large body of air with certain characteristics of temperature. Just make sure you're spelling it correctly. Temperature. Certain characteristics of temperature and this word, humidity. Humidity is how moist the air is, how much water vapor there is in the air. So a large body of air with certain characteristics of temperature and humidity. So we need then to define it based on those two things. On the basis of temperature, it can be, fill these in beside your two bullet points here. It can be tropical, which as the name suggests, coming from the tropics, and therefore is a warm air mass. Or it may be polar, your second bullet point. As the name suggests, coming from the poles, and a cold air mass. They go in there. On the basis of humidity, it may be continental, as coming from the continent, and therefore is a dry air mass. And the last one is maritime. That's coming from the sea or the ocean and is a moist air mass. Now, you may have visited a maritime museum, and if you did, you will have seen ships and naval paraphernalia there, because it comes from the Latin word for sea. Maris is the Latin word for sea. So maritime then is something coming over the sea. Now, for each of these different wind directions in the British Isles, we need to classify them on the basis of temperature. So it needs either a T or a P, and on the basis of humidity, so we need a small c or a small m. So if you don't have this filled in your notes now, pause the video and see if you can work out what goes in each of the circles, and I'll check back in with you in a few moments to give you the answer. Okay, now I'm going to use colour with this one because it's going to give us an indication of the temperature of them. And the colour of the one coming here is coming from the tropical regions, so it's tropical. It's coming over the Atlantic Ocean, so it's maritime. We're doing that in red because it's a mild or warm air mass. Now, what about the one coming from up here? This is coming from the northwest. It's polar. It's coming from the poles, but it's also travelling over the ocean, so it's maritime as well. Coming in here from the east, we'll do this in blue for now, although we'll discover this is a more complicated one. This is a polar air mass because it kind of originates from here, from the poles, but it's coming over the continent, so it's a polar continental air mass. And finally, I'm going to select a lovely red for this one because it's coming from the Sahara Desert region. It's tropics, but it's travelling over the continent to get to us, so it's tropical continental. And the last thing to say is that our prevailing winds typically come here from the west, so the air masses that we get most are your polar maritime, cold and wet, your tropical maritime, warm and wet. You can have rain in whatever flavour you like, warm or cold. It just tends to be wet because we live in good old Northern Ireland.